Oops. Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Whatever it is, wherever you are, that's what I mean. All right. So today is day 6 of transforming prayer. And once again, we are blessed. I don't even know what I'm thinking right now. Right now, today, once again, we're blessed to have Vicki Joy Anderson join us. So, Vicki, come on in here. Oh, there you go.
Hello, good afternoon.
So, we are doing day number 6 of transforming prayer, a 31-day prayer walk for your LGBTQ plus AI infinity
AI, that's good.
AI. Yeah, that's it. Isn't that like the newest ones are like AI or I or something? I don't know.
That's interesting little synchronicity there.
Yeah, wouldn't it be if it was
Mm,
AI?
mm,
So
mm.
yeah, well, we know. See, some people know what the next movement coming is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So day 6 is bad listening skills, if I can find it, or bad listening kills. Proverbs 18:13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shame. Anyone who has attended even one college level business course has learned that the habits of highly effective communicators begin not with gifts of oration, but with the lost art of being a good listener. Common tips given to would-be communicators are: 1, maintain eye contact; 2, be an active listener; 3, don't rehearse when others are talking. Listen. That was something I had to work on for a long time. It was trying to think of how I was going to respond while somebody was talking, thus not hearing what they were saying. Number 4 is don't interrupt. Still working on that one. Number 5, have empathy for the one speaking. Number 6, stay focused, stay on point. And 7 is visualize what the speaker is saying. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but it is a good start. I think I would add to that list, ask questions, not simply to clarify that you are both on the same page, but also for the purpose of building relationships. Get to know who the person is and not just what they are saying. See, we must get to know a person before we begin to counter their beliefs, because until they have actually explained their worldview to us, we will not know it. And all of our argumentation will be based on presumption. As my father likes to say, when people don't know the facts, they fill in the blanks.
This is where one-dimensional, scripted straw man arguments can take over, and the conversations digress into high school debate scenarios, striving to win points rather than souls. A foundation of friendship and trust must be laid before trying to build a 110-story gospel skyscraper on untested topsoil. In our fervor to bring our neighbors and coworkers to Christ, we often make grand entrances into their lives, rather than quietly entering through the back entrance like the rest of the servants. It never works when we perceive people as our projects rather than our peers. I have found almost everyone is willing to listen once they are ready. or perhaps more accurately, once they feel safe. Wait for that thumbs up. The opportunities will come, but we must earn them. We cannot get into a gospel steamroller and flatten people on day one. I had a job a couple of years ago, and when my coworker, let's call her Linda, found out I was a Christian, her eyes narrowed and her voice escalated to a defensive threat level. She told me that her in-laws were Christians and that they were always shoving the Bible down her throat. She demanded that I never speak to her about Yahweh ever. I prayed about this and felt that the best thing to do for the sake of Linda's soul would be to honor her request, as anything I said, even if I said it lovingly, would be received through defensive filters that would translate everything I said as judgment. I committed to remain silent, but prayed daily that Linda would change her mind and offer me an invitation to speak biblical truth into her life. About 6 months passed, and her mother unexpectedly had a stroke and died 24 hours later. At this stage, Linda began to ask me some elementary questions about the Bible, and a very primitive groundwork was laid. 3 months later, her 35-year-old husband was hit by a semi while riding his bike after work. He survived, but died on the operating table 3 weeks later. This triggered hours upon hours of conversation and phone calls, all fueled by Linda, who was pursuing me and initiated hundreds of questions, not about death or tragedy, but about who Yahweh is and what certain passages in scripture meant. To date, Linda is not a believer. The point of this story is simply that even if a person's walls are up and it seems like an absolute dead end, do not barrel forward with the steamroller. Pray and ask Yahweh to supernaturally intervene and to move in that person's heart to give you the invitation to preach the gospel to them. This will not always be done immediately or through circumstances as dramatic or tragic as Linda's. But please learn to wait on Yahweh and let your fervor to see your friends and family saved be fueled by love, not by panic or frenetic impatience. Yahweh is full of compassion and his timing is perfect. Part of good listening skills will be not only listening to the ones you are sharing the gospel with, but learning to listen to God.
And then, wow. So we're going to go into the heart preparation part. And yeah. My screen keeps disappearing on me. There we go. So heart preparation, number one, is am I an active or a passive listener? See, I already know that I think I'm a little bit of both. It just depends on the situation. It's really funny how our flesh works in that factor, and how our thoughts and feelings work in that answer. Because what's kind of funny, it's not funny at all, but what's kind of ironic maybe is that if a Christian speaks to me, I'm already thinking about whether they're right or wrong and if it's scriptural or not. When somebody who's lost and broken is speaking to me, I'm completely listening to them, absorbing everything they say because I relate, Yeah. And so I'm kind of on both. And so with the dealing with other Christians, I would automatically be thinking of my response and if what they were saying was scriptural without really hearing what they were saying.
Right.
And so
right.
I've been working on that for years.
Yeah. I have two strikes against me in this area, because if you asked other people, oh, is Vicki a good listener? They'd all say, oh my gosh, yes. But the problem is I'm introverted. I tend to keep my cards close to the vest until I feel safe. And I'm also a selfish, self-centered human being. So there are times when I'm out with people where I'm not interrupting, I'm not asking questions, I'm just listening. But if truth be told, it's because I'm bored, I'm thinking about being somewhere else, I'm not interested in what they're saying. I have determined for whatever reason that I don't want to expend the energy it would be take to argue with them, etc. So I think we can't deceive ourselves. We have to, going back to one of the earlier chapters, we're always have to be examining our motives, because what on the surface might look like, oh, Vicki is such a good listener, some of it is just pure selfishness and fear and anxiety. Like, well, I'm not going to let you know what I think until I know what you think. And like everyone else, you got to put your cards out on the table before I'm going to lay mine out. So a lot of it is self-protection, and there's all sorts of disgusting motives playing behind my good listening sometimes. But what's behind this question is I learned a very valuable lesson by accident. I was volunteering at a family camp back in 2013. It was literally 3 months after my mom died. So I was not in like a normal headspace, correct? And so I was at this camp for families that had kids with special needs. And so I had a roommate, and it was a woman from New York. And because I was in deep grief at the end of these days, I was mentally, physically, spiritually just empty and tired. And so we would go back to our room at night, and I would sit on my bed, and this woman from New York would talk and talk. She talked 100 miles an hour. She wanted me to know everything that had ever happened to her and what she did for a living and what then my daughter, my son, and blah, 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 blah. And I did not have the physical or mental capacity to even engage in conversation with her. So I just sat on my bed and looked at her and, did my best to let her know I was, paying attention, even though I really wasn't. I was completely in a different place. So this went on for a few days, and we were all together then, like all of the volunteers were having like a dinner together or something. And I was standing kind of behind her, and she did not know that I was there. And someone asked her, "Who's your roommate?" And she said, "Oh, Vicki Anderson's my roommate." And they said, "Oh, how was that?" And this woman said, "Oh, she is wonderful." And she started praising me. And I'm looking at her like I've never heard people who know me give me that much credit. And when she got to the end of all of these compliments, her summarization of why she felt all this about me, why that was her first impression of me, is she's the best listener. I've never met a listener like that. And I had to laugh internally, because I'm like, well, if I had not been grief stricken, I probably would have been interacting more and interrupting more and asking more questions and saying, oh, that happened to me once too. But I just think it's funny that my completely disconnecting in a conversation and not saying one word was perceived by this person as this valuable trait. And so like we also
passionately listening.
Yeah. And so on the other side of that, if you're not the introvert who doesn't really try that hard and makes everybody else do all the hard work, extroverts also have to be careful, because when you meet those wonderful people who are great listeners, a lot of times introverts are looking for a safe place to talk. If an introvert thinks they're going to be shut down, harshly corrected, interrupted, or that person's going to have to fight to get a word edgewise, or they're going to be interrupted, an introvert will shut down. If it's too much of an emotional depletion to get a word in, they'll just shut down and listen. So extroverts need to be careful that when you find this great introvert, good listening friend, it is selfish to dominate and not ever let them say anything. A lot of introverts have a lot of very good things to say, and they will never say it if they have to fight to say it. So introverts, we need to have more courage, and we need to get out there more, and we need to have to take more risks. And we need to share with people what God has told us and taught us. And extroverts, occasionally, you need to zip it. And even if they're a good listener, it's not all about you. You might have something to learn from them too, but a lot of introverts are waiting for the invitation to speak. And if you never give it to them, they probably won't say anything.
Wow, that's good. Which takes us into our next question and really kind of answers the next question of do I tend to dominate conversations, yes or no? And again, yes and no. You know, because really it just depends on the conversation.
Right.
You know, and I have a lot to say. As you know. Oh man, the grace that people show me is phenomenal. I'm telling you. You know, but at the same time, it's like the last few times that I went to speak, it's been like 2.5, 3 hours when I was in Ohio, and I mean, even when I was up in northern Maine, and then yesterday it was over 2, and you know, so it's like you have a lot to say, but sometimes people are starving for information and truth in specific areas, especially in an area where they're being slapped in the face with something that they don't agree with, but they're afraid to say they don't agree with it, you know. But at the same time, we need to realize that this isn't just about our conversations in general. You know, this is about us preparing ourselves to be able to intercede for somebody.
Right.
And so I'm getting ready to tell Vicki how her book is put together, right? So, but what I think that Vicki did with this is that, you know, the questions are you active or a passive listener? Because you have to start looking at these things. Why? Because when you're speaking to your loved one or your coworker or your neighbor or your child or your friend or whoever that you want to intercede for, and you want to do so properly and powerfully, you need to start looking at these things and recognizing them. Do you tend to dominate the conversations? Yes or no? You know, do sometimes just say something just because there's nothing being said? Because we don't always need to fill in air, you know, nothing with something just to say something. And then is there sometimes when there's nothing being said and something needs to be said? You know, so these are the things that we really have to look at and identify. And because these are the things that are going to help prepare us to be better intercessors. And did I get that right? Basically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on day one, we talked about first question on day one was, what are my blind spots? And I struggled with answering that question. And I was telling David about a friend of ours who read the book and still hasn't gotten past question one. That the difficult thing about asking the question, what are my blind spots, is the first 10 things that pop rapidly into your mind aren't your blind spots, or they wouldn't have popped into your head that quickly. And the reason they're blind spots is because we don't know. And it requires prayer and silence and waiting on Yahweh to reveal that to us. And one of the ways that he can reveal to us our blind spots, and this is really, really difficult because we fear the answer. You can go to people who know you and who love you, and you can say, tell me the truth. Do I dominate conversations? Am I irritating? Do I fire hose people? Do I not let people get a word in edgewise? Am I actually offending people? Am I annoying? Like, you got to have honest people, because a lot of people are like, no, not at all. And they walk away going like, oh, I should have told them the truth, you know, because we also have to be honest when people ask us honest questions, and that can be tough too.
Right.
But if you want to know what your blind spots
I'm not coming to ask anybody. because I don't want to argue with you. What's that mean? That means I already know.
Yeah, I know. Oh gosh, I know. Yeah, yep. There's blind spots, and then there's those things where, you know, we're painfully aware of it, and are just grateful for the grace that people show us. But yeah, I
Sometimes though,
just
I shouldn't even like joke about it, because sometimes we also are self-conscious of something that's not even there.
right.
I tend to relate to more things than the average person.
Mhm.
And so we all know the person in the crowd that's always like, anything you say you've done, they say, oh yeah, I've done that too. And they've done it better, and they were in worse circumstance, and it's just a
Yeah.
more extravagant
Yes.
scenario. And so what happens with me is that I really have been there, and I really have done that. And so my experiences are more extravagant than most people's, because most people look at me like I'm crazy, or like they just can't believe I said what I just said, and it's just, yesterday you should have saw the people looking at me, like some of them were like, and they looked at their partner, I was like, did you hear what he just said? But, and so sometimes I'm self-conscious of if I am dominating a conversation. And so sometimes I try not to say something, and then it's perceived as if I don't have anything to say about that, and I don't really care. So it's kind of it's not, sometimes we're very aware, sometimes there are blind spots, and sometimes we are self-conscious of those things
Mm-hmm.
that aren't even there for us, or that aren't an issue
Yeah.
for us, but we feel like they are. But that comes from when you come from a life of always being on the defense, like you're always ready to take the defensive role, and you always think someone's talking about you.
Yes. Yes.
Like, I can't even begin to tell you how many times when I was who I was, when I was like at a mall or in a restaurant, that I've like thrown something across the restaurant at somebody at their table because they looked at me a certain way, and I thought they were, and I just, my mind just told me they're talking about you, get them, and I acted on my thoughts and feelings, of course, but that's,
Oh yeah.
that's being real. I'm just letting there's a lot of people out there like that.
I've been there, David. When I was in high school, back in the 80s, Sony Walkmans were the big deal, and so you'd sit on the bus and you'd have your little headphones on with your cassette tape, right? And I was in such a heightened place of paranoia and self-pity.
I know exactly what you're gonna say.
I've been bullied so long that I would sit on the bus with my headphones on, and every 3 seconds I was whipping them off and like looking, because every single person that was talking was saying something about me and were just seizing the opportunity when I had those headphones on to say it so I wouldn't hear it. And
yeah,
I look back in my mind's eye now at that, and part of me can empathize with it, and then but part of me is like, Vic, how I love that line by Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse in the world than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. And it's just the catch-22 of all humanity. We don't want people gossiping and talking bad about us, but we want everybody to be talking about us. We're this like paradox, and it was such a good point that you brought up about the one-upmanship people. Oh my goodness. Part of what we talked about yesterday was the meaning of real biblical love is laying down your life for one another, and that also includes the daily dying to self, putting yourself second. And you know what? There's a lot of people out there, they don't have a lot of these big, huge, wonderful, faith-inspiring, faith-building stories to tell. They might have one or two. And every once in a while, we have to give people a win. We have to let them say something and not immediately top it. Sometimes one of the ways we can die to ourselves in a very simple way is to let our brothers and sisters have a win now and then. If they're telling something that profoundly changed their life, say that is awesome. And even if you've got 10 stories in your head to beat it, just shut up. Like we've all done it.
That's good. It's the same thing as like, you don't have to be right even when you're right.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes there's some arguments just aren't worth arguing.
Right.
And I learned that because I live with my mom. So you don't have to be right even when you're right.
It's interesting that you bring up a family relationship because one thing I remember my dad telling me a long time ago, and when I was a kid, it kind of went over my head, and as I got older, it's profound and terrible at the same time. My dad told me that a lot of times, if there's people that you do not like, and every time they open their mouth, it's just like nails on the chalkboard and they're irritating and you think they're stuck up or whatever it is. If you really, again, this goes back to motives, if you really evaluate sometimes why you have such a firm dislike for certain people, a lot of times it's because they're exhibiting behaviors like you were talking about earlier. There's ones that we're subconsciously aware of, like we're not quite aware of them. When we see it in other people, it's this mirror up to us, like, is that how I come off to people? And there's shame in it. It's shaming. So rather than evaluating what can I do to not be like this anymore, we just self-righteously dislike these people. And a lot of times, when we are judging a person, we think they're too skinny or they're too pretty or they're too rich or they're too smart or whatever. If you really evaluate it, many times there might be something in that personality that you're deeming as prideful or arrogant or self-centered or whatever. But sometimes it can be a mirror of what you're like. And I know for me, I am almost instantly irritated by people who feel sorry for themselves, where the glass is always half empty. I'm very irritated by pessimism, especially in America, where even the worst person off has got it pretty good. And I've realized through time that the reason why that irritates me is because I spent a good 15 years of my life in a pity party. And when I realize that's how I came off to everybody, it's embarrassing. So the real emotion isn't this person's annoying. It's, oh my gosh, Vic, that's embarrassing. That's who you were. That's embarrassing. So sometimes we got to just look in the mirror. When the next time you're around someone and they are irritating you, I challenge you to get to the bottom of what exactly is irritating about this, because it might have an aha moment embedded in it.
Yeah. Wow. See, it just takes you to a whole nother level because, this is all part of preparing your heart, getting prepared to be able to intercede for those people.
Yeah.
For those very people. Some of them are those very people that irritate you and you can't stand, and just the sound of their voice irks you. And so now you're going to find out why. And then, and then you're going to deal with it before you can intercede for them, because you will be interceding for them.
Yep.
Wow. So absolutely. Number 3 is, am I an active or passive listener in prayer? Ooh. Do I do all the talking when I pray? Do I ever sit in silence to hear Yahweh answer back? Boom, shakalaka, boom, boom. Okay? Because there's a whole nother spectrum that I've experienced, and so I know this question is spot on and so real, because it used to be all about, yo, God, this is what's going on. Like he didn't know. This is how I feel. like he didn't know. This is what I want to see happen, like he didn't know, you know, and it would just be a very one-sided
Mm-hmm.
conversation, kind of like the conversations that sometimes we have with other people, you know. And when I started, when I learned how to actually pray through, um, you know, and we won't get into all the doctrinal ideology things, but um, when I actually really started experiencing prayer on a whole nother level, um, it took me to a whole nother level. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I was able to just, you know, just pray, you know, and really, if we look at the Lord's Prayer, we see the admonition and, you know, and all of that, and we see the different areas and the different parts of prayer and how we should go into prayer. But once we get into prayer, if we realize that we can actually continue in prayer and pray through to like a breaking point to where we are just flat out on our face and we're listening and we're hearing from God. We're hearing
Mm-hmm.
from God. His Holy Spirit is giving us what we need and what we're seeking.
Yep.
And it's just a whole nother level of prayer. And
Yep.
it's like,
On, I think it was day 4, we were talking about that prayer being the wartime walkie-talkie. So I've had jobs before where we have walkies, and anyone who's ever used one knows you press in the button when you talk, and then you let go of it to let someone else talk. And if you accidentally keep that button held in, you can't hear the other person talking. You can't hear the other person talking until you let go of that button. And so a walkie-talkie is a two-way communication device, as is prayer. And when prayer becomes that, okay, I got my walkie-talkie and I got my finger on the button and God is getting every single thing I'm sending to him, it's the equivalent of refusing to take your finger off that button. And he's up there going like, I'm trying to talk to you. Can you take your finger off the button? Take your finger off the button, but you can't hear it because your finger's on the button. And
wow.
I've been there too. And I think I've told you, not during these videos for Transforming Prayer, but on some videos we did in the past. This was a massive conviction I came to after my mom died and had a bit of a spiritual realignment. But because I did go through so much growing up, a lot of bullying, I had tons of anxiety, and I was a wreck during the school day. I was just on eggshells my entire day, like what's going to happen, who's going to say what, and I was just in survival mode for, the first 17 years of my life, but didn't realize it until much later. And when I started learning about true prayer, that two-way communication, get your finger off the button, there's a line I use that just because you stick the word "Dear Jesus" on one end and "Amen" on the other end of a panic attack, that just means it's a panic attack. And I don't want people to hear that God isn't empathetic to people who are in trauma or who are in a period of survival. And what's amazing is those 17 years of panic attack prayers, Yahweh heard every single one of them. I could tell you hours and hours of stories where I would pray through every second of my day. Oh God, please let there be a seat on the bus, because I would get on the bus some days and no one would want to sit by me. And then I would have to stand because no one would sit by Icky Vicky. And I would be at the bus stop praying frantically that there would be an empty bus seat so I could sit down first. And times a million for all of my years going to school, I had 100 prayers every day. God, please, God, please, God, please, God, please. He is so compassionate. He answered millions of those prayers because he does care about us.
Yes, he does.
But after we're weaned off of the milk and we start eating the meat of the word, we have to also move beyond the help me, help, please, 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 please. We have to get over the panic attack purposes of prayer and get to that walkie-talkie communication where it's two-way, We're interceding for other people. Now we're safe. We're out of that battle zone. I'm not in junior high anymore, thank God. I'm out of that battle zone. And I'm now healthy and awake and alert and healed and full of joy. And I've been healed. So do I keep just going to God and panicking over my rent? Or do I realize that there are thousands of little Vickies being bullied just like me now that need someone standing in the gap for them? And am I going to grow to a point of maturity past my own selfish purposes for that prayer? So it needs to become something more as we mature in the faith.
Right. So listen, if you're going to spend time in prayer, then you have to be spending time listening, because that's just the way it goes, right? And so we are on question number 3 of the heart, question number 4 of heart preparation. When people tell me to back off and not to push my religion down their throat, I usually respond by well, let me see. I think it usually depends on who I'm talking to. Once again, for me, these are very situational, responses and answers, because there are some people. This is the reason why I came to the to that crossroad of not preaching to people I don't have a relationship with. That I came to that area where I do not minister and preach to people unless I have a relationship with them, because they will not receive it. And that's
right.
What I always got. And when you are embraced, or you embrace somebody who is just broken, and it is almost audible, and you basically hear, you don't have to tell him he's right. You don't have to tell him he's wrong, because he already knows. You need to establish a relationship with him so I can do that through you. That's when I got to that crossroad, like, okay, so I'll take a testimonial book with me. I'll take my phone with me, so I have access to the scriptures if they ask. But when I'm out in the street, and again, these aren't people that I have relationships with, but everybody I meet is somebody I want to have a relationship with, because everybody I meet is somebody I want to be their brother. I don't want to be their friend. I want to be their brother, and it's just like that. So for me, these are situational questions. And so I would just tell, again, it depends on who it is, So I really can't. I don't really get that. I don't get that response from people anymore. What's funny is I get that response from Christians. Like, oh, you just need to slow down. You're just a little too much, David. You're like really turning into one of those Jesus freaks. And so if I get that response now, I get it from Christians.
Yeah.
But I don't get it from the lost, because I don't approach them in that manner anymore. So I'll let you take that and answer it.
You are so right in that it's situational. There is not a one-size-fits-all method of sharing the gospel. People are too complicated. The people doing the witnessing are complicated. The people you're sharing with, they're complicated. We all have, and especially in this day and age, you don't know if who you're approaching is someone who's been sexually abused, or if they have trauma, if they're mentally ill, if they're heavily medicated, if they're high on drugs. Like, you can't just go up and be, for spiritual laws, blah, blah, but I see that it's the culture is shifting. Like when I was a kid in the 70s, everything was about sharing your faith, gospel tracts, 4 spiritual laws, all of these like street witnessing techniques and icebreakers and things that you can say to turn the conversation. And it was all a very aggressive, confrontational, and I don't mean confrontational in a bad sense, but
Right.
the you're hitting it head on is what I mean. You're just getting the gospel laid out, and they're teaching us steps to peace with God, and you get out the napkin at the restaurant and you draw the 2 chunks of land and the cross is the bridge and like all the stuff you got to do. But then I'd say about 15 years ago, there was this shift in the church, and it all became missional. And it became the Mars Hill approach, where you go to the bar and you drink a beer and you talk to the drunks. You go on the golf course, and while you're golfing, you just, show people Jesus. Don't show, don't tell. And then we got into the whole like, hey, I don't need to share the gospel because I'm just wearing this cool God's Gym t-shirt, and I got the WWJD bumper sticker, lifestyle evangelism. And how are all the ways that I can just show people I'm a Christian and it's awesome, so that they'll come and ask me about it rather than my having to be the initiator. And so it's not about a cultural trend. There's always 100 different ways to do it. And it doesn't matter if we come up with some new bright idea. We can add that new bright idea to our repertoire, and in certain cases that will work. But we don't have to get rid of the old school stuff. We don't have to never talk to someone on the street ever again, or never write out something on a napkin while we're out with a friend. And so it is not a one size fits all. And telling an extremely shy Christian that they've got to like force a gospel presentation every time they're out with someone, that's terrifying. And
Oh my gosh.
You are going to be heaping all sorts of unnecessary guilt and anxiety upon those. They're going to shut down. And so
and then they fall into that very passive, pew warming, not growing, not maturing, stay on milk.
Yeah.
And we see so much of that. We don't want to address it, but we see a lot of it. But we're not going to turn this into that. Not today.
Yeah. You know what? If we get up every morning and we have that 2-way communication with Yahweh, we've met with him, we have meditated on his word, we have built ourselves up and filled that cup up for the day. We're now under that banner. The whole rest of the day, we are in that power. And don't worry about what to say before it's going to happen. Things are going to happen organically. And this whole idea that we have to somehow force these things to happen, that rarely works.
Yeah. And we have to see people as people instead of seeing them as projects and as something to do and as targets.
Yes.
We have to see them as people, because if we don't, they're not going to receive.
Right. Well, and I think too, I was never a Girl Scout, but I think if I have my facts right, Girl Scouts would have this like badge, this pin or something. And it was like their good deed badge. And once they had done a good deed that day, because they would put it on upside down. And once they did their good deed, they'd flip it right side up. So you could tell by looking at the Girl Scout pins if they had done their good deed for the day, because the pin wasn't upside down anymore. And I feel like a lot of Christians have that mentality with sharing your faith has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that you love someone or that person is lost. And like it doesn't have anything to do with other than the fact that, oh my gosh, I got to get that witnessing pin flipped around for the day. Did my witnessing for the day. Oh, thank God. And that's all about anxiety, works-based guilt. That is not what should motivate us to share the gospel. And it's not what's going to change other people's lives. Like when I've had situations where people don't know I'm a Christian, and I'm in a workplace or whatever, and I can tell that they're Christians trying to do that little good deed witnessing for the day. it is just awkward being in these conversations where they're sweating and they're stuttering and it's just like, dude, I'm gonna let you off the hook. I love Jesus Christ. They're like, oh, thank God.
Wow.
Because it's like, if it's coming off that awkward, like you are trying to sell a set of encyclopedias to, somebody at their door, it just back away.
Hey, I want to say hi to Cynthia and David Hawkins, as well as Barbara Hamblin. Hello, BJ.
Hey.
Definitely want to say hello. BJ is going to be joining me on my show very soon as a guest. And I'm not going to let the cat out the bag because she's got a powerful, 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 powerful testimony. All testimonies are powerful, 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 powerful.
Amen.
And the reason that all testimonies are that powerful is because our one true living God has allowed each one of us to obtain this customized tool that only we can use, and that is our testimony. And so, it's not only obtainable, but it's retainable. And so we have to get to where we know that. So let's look at question number 5 is, what sort of silent methods of witnessing do I employ? Prayer, intercession, etc. So silent methods. Well, I leave my book in little tracks. The ones that say hallelujah, I'm gay, or I'm gay, you could be too. It says I'm gay, you could be too, and I leave them at like rest stops and stuff. And so that they're grabbing them, right? Because that's where they're going to look for their activity. And then they open it up. It says, meet David Arthur, trapped for 30 plus years in the homosexual and transgender world. Now David is free from those unwanted attractions. Gay, adjective, merry, airy, jovial, sportive, frolicsome. It denotes more life and animation than cheerful. Think you were born that way? Jesus said to be born again. Jesus also said, deny yourself if you choose to follow him. And then they open up and they get Romans 1:27, which of course is the one passage that destroyed my whole foundation. And they get a little picture. And then on the back, it says, behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. So that's my little silent witnessing, is leaving tracks in public bathrooms and rest stops, and or sometimes I'll take a couple of my books in Barnes and Noble or in any bookstore, and I'll put them on the shelf next to certain books, and just say, okay, somebody's gonna find it. There's no barcode on it. They don't have to pay for it, So we'll see what happens. So that's my silent witnessing, besides prayer and intercession, but this is about really us getting prepared to be able to be good prayers and good intercessors. And but just because you're preparing yourself to become a better intercessor or a more powerful intercessor doesn't mean you don't intercede in the meantime.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and I think another one we talked about a little bit yesterday is fasting, investment of time. Anyone can write a check to a mission organization and be done with it for the year. Investment of time. People want time. People out there, they're lonely, they're broken. They don't have family. Investment of time, inviting them over for dinner, helping them move. But another thing, and we talked, I think, a little bit about this yesterday, but this is huge. And I know it's not the fun answer. We love formulas because we can wrap our heads around them and we can check it off a to-do list and we can know. But daily seeking to identify and turn from and kill the sin in our own lives will have a direct impact on the strength and power of the body and on our witness to other people. And if we are not paying attention to a pursuit of holiness. And by holiness, I don't mean perfection or sinlessness. I mean setting ourselves apart from the world. We are different from the world. We're not talking like them, joking like them, dressing like them, going where they're going. We're in a set apart assembly of believers, like in the Old Testament. You could spot a Jew in the Old Testament from all of the pagan tribes. They dressed different, their hair was different, their clothes was different, their diet was different, their holidays were different. They were different. You could spot them a mile away. Now you go into like a mall or a bus station, you don't know the Christians from the non-Christians.
No. You go into a church building, you don't know the Christians from the non-Christians.
No. So the power.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
The power of the gift of healing. We talked about this week. Confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed. Yes. Confession of sin, repentance, humility, killing sin, not just saying like, whew, glad I got away with that and no one found out again. Or, now because there's no shame in our society, it used to be like, nobody wanted to admit they would have been mortified if someone found out that they had a porn mag, or and now it's like, you got these men's groups. I've heard all about them. They get together every single Wednesday to talk about how they looked at porn that week, and they go home and they come back and they all admit it again the next week, and bro, and it's okay. And then it's just gathering once a week to tell them you looked at porn again. That there's no shame in it. There's no repentance.
I've been to some of the men's groups, and let me say, they take it way too far, and their details become pornography for everybody listening.
It's a vicarious playing out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, so the ones that can't go home and watch porn, they still get to visualize their porn.
Yes.
And it has the same effect on them because they can listen to all the sordid details. So I've been to too many of them.
Yep. One of the old reformers said, be killing your sin or it will be killing you. And one of the silent methods, if you want to be a powerful change on this planet, if you want to live out your purpose, if you want to please and honor God, if you want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, if you want to have the gift and power of healing, if you want your friends and loved ones to turn their back on their sin and come to know Jesus Christ and be saved, kill your sin. Then worry about theirs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't do it. You can't be going to, One thing I learned early on is that the world is watching. The world is watching us.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody that knows you're a Christian is watching you, whether you know it or not, and whether it seems like it or not, they're watching and they're paying attention. And if you really want proof, just go tell them about one thing they're doing wrong, because they'll be sure to tell you about all the things you're doing wrong. That's a good way to find out what you're doing and what you're not doing. Is go tell a non-Christian what they're doing wrong, because they won't have no problem telling you what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, I want to edit what I said earlier. If you want to know your blind spots, find someone you love and trust. You want to know your blind spots, tell your coworker what they're doing
there
wrong.
You go. And I never really thought about it as a silent method, but it's just that. Establishing relationships with them. It's a silent method of it's a silent method of witnessing. Because when you establish a relationship with somebody, you are the example. Mm-hmm. So whether they know you're a Christian or not, they're going to know if you're a good example. Word, deed, action. If your word, deed, and action are all, according to the will of our Father, then if you're representing Jesus Christ in word, in deed, and in action, they're going to know. They don't have to know because you tell them, because there's a whole lot of people out there on the street corners telling the world that they're Christian, and they're farther than from Christianity than those people they're telling that Christians are.
Right.
I'm not going to go there this afternoon. Question number 6 is, when I feel heard and understood, I feel loved, which builds trust. What am I doing to build trust in my relationships? Another, and that one's not as really situational as other questions in these chapters have been. That one is pretty cut and dry to me. I think that I think and I feel, right? Besides what I think and besides what I feel, what I do is establish relationships with them. That's how I build my trust. I confide in them. I share things. And most people that I meet on the street, they don't know that I get on doing a live stream and get on the internet and broadcast my deepest, darkest, secrets. They don't know that. So when I'm telling, like, the people yesterday, when I was saying some of the things I said, I'm telling you, some of the looks were like, oh my goodness. They're like looking around. Are the police coming? Is the pastor going to shut the mic off? Do we push him out? What do we do? But the pastor, he already knew, and so they don't know. And so when you tell somebody some like really deep, intimate, personal stuff, they really feel a bond with you. I love just the way I get to spend time with people. And that's it. Spending time with them and just sharing with them and not ever, I don't ever beat anybody in the head with the scriptures, because and every now and then I might do it to somebody, like I don't want to say as a joke, because it's no joke, but just to be kind of like, like they'll say, oh yeah, so I lied about that, and I'll be like, oh yeah, there's a place for liars in the lake of fire, and they'll just be like, yeah, I know, whatever, but things like that. But I think if you're intimate, if you see somebody, if you see everybody as somebody that you can be intimate with, that's a real good way to establish a relationship and to be a darn good witness to them.
Yeah, what you're saying about there's nothing that is going to build trust like sharing on a more intimate level. And I think this is why we have such shallow relationships now, because we have this kind of socially engineered new definition of friends, because it's social media friends, and we just send each other memes from television shows. And so I have some friends where I had a coworker once in particular. I told him after 3 years, I don't know one thing about you. I don't know anything about your family, where you grew. I don't know one thing about you, because all you talk about is movies, television, and video games. And everything was just like a movie quote, or, years went by and I didn't know anything about this coworker. I didn't know anything about his life.
Nobody knows how to have intimate relationships anymore. Nobody. Yep. They're very impersonal now.
Yep. And I tell you, this is an extreme example, and I hope people can understand why I'm saying it and where we're getting it. But I worked in special needs for years, and there was one place that I worked. It was one of my favorite jobs ever. And there was about 150 special needs clients, all between the ages of 18 all the way up to, 60s, 70s, 80s. And when you first start, everybody is on various levels of verbal and nonverbal. And, special needs people have an uncanny ability to judge who can be trusted and who can't. It is amazing, their sense of perception. But what was really crazy, David, was there were several of these adult clients that were in wheelchairs. And so a couple times a day, you had to use these mechanical lifts, and you'd bring them in the equivalent of like an adult changing room, and you would lift them out of their wheelchair and you would change their diapers, basically. And what fascinated me, David, about this job, I worked there for about 2 years. There were clients that you would bond with and get super close to, who would run and scream and hug you every single time they saw you. Every morning was like they hadn't seen you in 10 years, and they would bond with you. And then there were others that like didn't give you the time of day. And what was interesting to me is the more high functioning a special needs client was, in other words, the more self-sufficient they were, the less able the staff was to connect to them, the more distant they were, the more they weren't coming and asking for help. But the clients that you changed, the clients that you fed, and the clients who even maybe one time had an accident or threw up or had a seizure, from that point forward, they loved you.
Yeah.
They were loyal to you. And if they ever had a problem, or they scraped their knee, or someone was teasing them, or they forgot their lunch, they would look around that room and they would see you, and they would come at you, and they would cling to you, and they depended on you, and they trusted you, and they loved you. And it was because you met a need.
That's right.
And it's because they had a need, and us people who are extremely high functioning and we have jobs and we can pay our own bills, we don't need anything. And we are robbing ourselves of deep, meaningful relationships with one another when we don't ever say, I need you. And sometimes that need is, I've got a porn addiction nobody knows about. My divorce, my marriage is ready to fail. I have a kid who came out of the closet. You have no idea what you are robbing yourself of when you don't share these things with other people. The bond, the trust, the intimacy that builds. And the enemy flips it on us. He's like, if I tell that person, they're going to gossip, they're going to spread it all over, they're going to lose respect for me, they're not going to.
Yeah. Wow.
So I don't even quite know how to wrap that point up, David, other than the fact that when we need each other, it doesn't make us weak and pathetic. When
That's
we
right.
need each other, it makes us strong.
That's right. Amen. I'm definitely with that, because look, I don't want to deal with things and go through things by myself. I don't want to do that. I did that all my life, and now I don't have to, and now I'm not going to. Why?
Amen.
Because I have brethren, who I love, who love me, who I care about, who care about me, who I'm intimate with, who are intimate with me. And it's the most phenomenal thing to know intimacy after never knowing intimacy, so yeah. And that's what it is. When you have an intimate personal interaction with somebody, that person feels some kind of way about you.
Yep.
And that's a good thing. So I guess we're going to go into the prayer section of day number 6. Okay. I'll take the first column. You start at Ask Yahweh. So Pray and ask the Father to give you wisdom, patience, and discernment. Ask the Holy Spirit to make it clear to you when not to speak and when to listen. Ask the Spirit to reveal any steamroller tendencies or blind spots that you may have. What things might you be doing to unwittingly harden the hearts of those you are ministering to? Ask Yahweh to supernaturally reveal to you the secret keys to these to your loved one's heart, to whoever you're dealing with, to their heart, because he will. What are the words or actions that will unlock the fortress around their heart and open their minds and ears to receiving the gospel message without confusion, without misunderstanding, and without angst?
Ask Yahweh in Jesus' name to remove any spiritual force of influence in your loved one's life who is hindering the gospel message from taking root. Ask that opportunities, open doors, and invitations to speak about the word, Jesus, and the gospel would present themselves. Ask Yahweh to prepare your heart and mind for these conversations, as well as the heart and mind of those you will be speaking to. Pray that inroads of understanding would be forged and that the enemy would not be able to interfere, confuse, or shut down these opportunities. James 1:19, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry.
Amen and amen. And wow, that's day 6. Tomorrow will be 1 week of us being in Transforming Prayer by Vicki Joy Anderson. And I say again, if you want to get this book, it's on Amazon and on Kindle. And it's Vicki Joy Anderson, Transforming Prayer. It would be phenomenal for many of you to have the book as we go through it day by day, even if you get it on Kindle. So, yeah, that's day 6. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we'll be here and we'll be bringing you day 7. And at that point, we'll be just about halfway through the self-examination. And I really can't wait to get through the self-examination because the intercession is so powerful. And so, Vicki, thank you again for taking some time out of your day to join us. And
Absolutely.
You know, it's just amazing. One, that she's willing to come on here every day when she can, you know, and so it's just amazing. So thank you, Vicki, and give your dad a big hug. Tell him we love him.
I will.
We miss him. And
I will.
thank you guys. I love you guys. And I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for my show. And we don't have a set time for doing the Transforming Prayer. So just have to look out for that notification. God bless y'all. Peace.